Morning, Deirdre.
Good morning, Tom. How are you today?
A little chilly still.
I can see that. There's still a lot of snow out there.
We have
In
got
our
to
in
finish our 72 series so we can, or 73 series, right?
72-3, which we're in.
Oh my
Two
goodness.
more of these,
I
yes.
can't believe I messed up the counting. 70, and I have it wrong on my other one too. Okay. So 73, and this is about engaging with the machine.
Correct.
We have been working with people, and you've done some work recently too. And we just constantly see the same thing when people are beginning to engage with the machine until they get really going with it. And this is for people that are actively now trying to build something, familiarity, or build a layer to help them run their businesses or do whatever they do in their work, because we think it's enormously powerful. And you'll find all that in our podcasts in this 72 series, excuse me. Um, but this is our part of our university where we teach people how to do things, right? Very much how to do this is along with not only the how, but the why. We see one common thing that the machine does not seem to automatically do, and that is to properly define the context or to properly learn the context of what you are dealing with in dealing with these problems. And we'll show different examples. You'll actually show a real
Right.
example that you were working through earlier, which is not a business example, but um, will show exactly this point. And the second is the actual way that the human deals with this. And I think with the engagement so frequently in social media, we have developed a pattern, or many people have developed a pattern in how they deal with seemingly the machine, and they don't give it enough depth because these are very powerful capabilities, and uh, they don't respect not giving them good guidance. So, with that, I'll let you take and take the description a little further.
All right. One of the things that we've seen is that uh, people tend to use these generative AI models in a very simple way. They tend to say use it for search, or they tend to use it to say write thank you notes to their aunts, or other little memos or things like that. In other words, they tend to use it for very simple things that they themselves might not want to do. In that sense, they're, well, obviously vastly underestimating the power or the utility that they can get from these, but they're actually treating it almost like a simple app on the phone. And I've been talking with Tom for a while about this, that so many people seem to treat these models as like a word processing program you download, and there it is installed on your computer, and you use it for certain things, period. Well, what that does is it vastly limits what you're going to get out of it. Now, Tom, we've been doing for almost 6 months now, going back to our 60s, 67, 68, 69, 70 examples of how to interact with some of these models in a more advanced way. So I think that our listeners will probably not be the ones to just use this for search, but we always seem to have the conversation with people. It's sort of as if they've heard about these models and it's sort of like, oh, yeah, yeah, it's like a better Google search. Well, yeah, but, you know. So there's an art to learning to interact with these, what I consider the human machine partnership. In other words, I think the way to think about this is as the human machine partnership, where you're not simply doing a task, but you're interacting in a way for your mutual benefit. And having said that, Tom, let me turn it over to you for some more points.
Yeah, I think, um, I've seen this recently. I was helping a friend of mine a few days ago work through using it to do. help on forming a proposal for his new business idea that he'd like to pursue, which is a non-tech business. It's a services business. And what where he was struggling a little bit was not uh, not engaging the machine in a way that you would engage a human. And this is what I was having. I had to get him to think about, look, this thing is just as capable as many human beings, and in a lot of ways more capable in some aspects, right? Cognitive aspects. On It's not so good in non-cognitive aspects right now, but when it's paired with other things like robots and so forth, it can be very powerful in non-cognitive areas. But what he was struggling with is that he wasn't getting the most out of it. And in fact, he was getting things he didn't want
Right.
because he wasn't giving it. So an example was this. We were looking at the branding, and he had done a lot of mock-ups of branding. And so he had pictures of the layout of the organization and the services and the logo and the merchandise and so forth. And it's beautiful, by the way. I thought he'd done an incredible job, not only with the name, but the logos and just, oh my gosh, it's really cool. I wish I had that kind of um, sensibility about that sort of thing. Regardless, he wanted to then incorporate that into the way we were building out this thing, which was perfectly correct, right? So I foolishly asked for a 15-minute break after a number of hours, and I said, I'll be back, keep going. Well, when I got back to Zoom, he was in Never Never Land. It was doing analysis of the actual pictures themselves, looking at the bytes and all this. And it was often, it had done a serious student body left. Because what he had done is just put the pictures in there and hit the button and so he didn't give it any guidance. As a result, it had, oh, and there was another aspect too. As a result, it didn't know what to do with the pictures, so it analyzed the pictures. Uh, but to start it out, he had put in a set of numbers that ChatGPT had given him about the business, but he had no other context. So it was trying to do a comparison of and trying to figure out how do the numbers and the pictures fit together, right? I mean, it was off in serious Never Never Land.
Right.
When I got back, it was in some kind of algorithmic calculation that we had to put a stop to essentially because it was still going, trying to figure out what's the interreaction, mainly because there was no context around it, right? And and it was good because he was getting now in his defense, he hadn't really tried to do this stuff yet. So it had been me doing it for him up until that point, and then he was doing it. Now, he had been using ChatGPT for a long time, but his interaction with ChatGPT was much like social media because I saw how he was doing it. He wasn't thinking of it as a cognitive machine. He was thinking about it, as you said, an advanced search. Or that's not fair because that's not the way he was saying. It was writing things for him and writing a letter and all that kind of stuff, but it was not real serious, what you and I call complex work, right? Which is not just pure productivity work, but there's an aspect of doing synthesis or research and synthesis.
Mhm.
And so the more that you interact with it, Deirdre, in this point that you make about the partnership and treat it as a resource, not as a tool. It's not like a hammer that you pick up and you slam and it always is hitting a nail, or you hope it does, or something like that you'd like to hit with it, have it hit. Um, you're really trying to get it to help craft something. And when you think about it that way, it becomes a very different thing. It's much like a scalpel oh no, that's not the right term for it, but whatever a sculptor uses. I don't know what the right term is, but in their hands, that's a very different thing, and it's helping create something. And it's that working with whatever the sculptor's working with that is really what's happening. This is very much the same. You can hand it to a novice and they wouldn't know what to do with it. But with a real professional, they can make something incredibly gorgeous out of it. These tools have that ability. They really do. Now, in the defense of the human, you saw how frustrated I was after this weekend where I could not get what I wanted. And I had to go back to ground zero. I got something, but you took one look at it and said, this is not good. Yes. Is the raw material good? Yes. But what it did with it to try to synthesize three different things, to then take and improve it as a result of three different things you and I had done together, right? I had written one thing, we had done a podcast, and then I had written something else. And so putting all three together, it just went off in Never Never Land. And so, but again, this is about how I had probably not instructed it properly in how what I wanted it to do.
And you're getting at a point that we've made a number of times across the videos we've done, but it's worth repeating in this particular context, that we have to remember where these tools are coming from, what they've been trained on, the data sets, and what they do, that they really just predict the next thing that comes out of their analysis like that. And they can only work with what they have. Now, what you were working with was a very good model of these models that had clearly been trained on a lot of material that was traditional. And
Yes.
you and I do advanced thinking along these lines. And
Well, Deirdre,
even,
I hope I do advanced thinking. We all know you do, but the question is, do I? And actually, we talk about my sister, right? My
right.
sister said, you underestimate. I've appreciated you longer than you think I have. And then she gave me another compliment too. So my sister probably thinks I'm closer to doing that than you are, than I think I am. But no, we are. We do complex work with these models. Now, are we doing the ultimate advanced work with these models? No, but we're doing pretty complex work for business people.
We're not letting the models think for us. That's a very
That
important
is true.
point. You can't let the models think for you because they're limited by what they've been trained on and what they've been trained to produce as output. Now, in your particular case, it was concerning because you had entered into the model as context transcripts of our videos, materials you had written, and so forth. And the model was still stuck
Mhm.
in the data sets it had been trained on. In other words, it could not bridge the gap between the context you were creating and what it had been trained on. Now, the important lesson here is that it took the humans to see what was happening. So we knew we could not use this particular output until we had commented on it. And unfortunately, we've seen too many times people just say printing something out, pulling it, and handing it in. And in this particular case, if this had been handed in to me, I'd take one look at it, look at the person who handed it to me, and said, "You've got to be joking." You
Yeah.
know,
Well, you did say that, but you don't say that quite that way to me, Deirdre, but it was essentially that.
you're sort of
But you
like,
knew
Tom,
the
this looks a
origin.
little old. You
Yeah,
know?
really. Yes, exactly. That doesn't look quite new enough to me.
Right. Uh-huh.
Uh, but this is the other point. It can be so convincing in the way that it describes what it's doing and presents what it's doing that it is easy to fall and say, I'm the one that's behind, not
Right.
the machine. And that's what I was having trouble with. You remember I sent it to you and I said, I don't like this.
Right.
I'm not sure why. I can't figure out why I don't like it because it was my material, but it didn't seem right. It didn't sound, I kept saying, I don't like the wording. I've got to
Right.
get, and
Mhm.
here it is. I constructed it and I still couldn't figure out why I didn't like it.
But I think the important point is it wasn't your information.
Yeah, it
It
had veered
was
off
the
of it.
interaction between the whole body of material that the model had been trained on, trying to make sense and connect
Yeah,
your information with them. That's why you have to understand how these models work so you can interpret the output you get so that you can then take it further to get what you want. Remember our 5-step process where we let the model do some research so we can tell what the model does, its breadth, its depth, its bias. Then we do some interacting with it to try to see if we can get something, see how it's reacting to what we're saying. Then we provide context, and you had provided context, and it didn't read your context well.
that's
Then we let
exactly
the
right.
model do more work, synthesis work, and the model did not do a good job of synthesis. It put far too heavy a reliance on the old material it had been trained on and less on the material which is where you wanted it to go, like that. And we had to understand. And then our next final step is the finalizing, where we as the humans were looking at it and saying, this isn't what we wanted.
Do you know what was interesting about it too, Deirdre, is that, and again, we're not being as concrete as we mostly are, but people will understand what we're talking about here. It reminds me, I had actually given it the transcript for Ahead of the Machine. So what it was trying to do, I think, was it took the front, which is what I wanted it to do, is take the way I had written Ahead of the Machine and the context of you have to stay ahead of it. You have to understand how technology is changing the world and fit what you're doing in that way. And then you have to stay ahead of that and guide it. It was
Right.
trying to fit that context with what I had written. And then the podcast you and I had done on this, and then like you said, when I had said, see what you can do about synthesizing all this and
Mhm.
updating this list that I had, and it just went off in Never Never Land, and I couldn't tell why. And
Right.
it took you to look at it, and you saw it right away. The interesting thing about it, though, is I have to basically start over. What I'm going to end up doing is deleting that whole stream and
Right.
start over because
Correct.
I have polluted that process so badly. Now, where did I go wrong? I probably should, as you and I were talking about this, I probably should not have tried to take it that far the first time. I should probably have to say, would you take this and see if you can put in those contexts? What is missing in that list I gave you based on this particular thing? What is the next one? What's the next one? And then I can begin pulling them together rather than have it try to pull all that out and integrate it into a new way of doing it before I take and rewrite it in my own voice.
Hmm.
And I think we concluded that we're in such new territory for the machine. That's probably the only way I'm going to be able to do this time.
Correct. And just reminding our listeners that what we're really talking about in this podcast is the human machine partnership,
Yeah.
how you have to change your thinking when interacting with these tools to make sure that you're getting what you want out of it. But part of this is understanding what the machine is doing, because sometimes you can't diagnose the output unless you realize what it's working from and how it had to struggle to put things together to give your output. And by the way, the example you've given should give our listeners a starting point for understanding the output that they get from some of the projects they work on these. Understanding that you can take the output and say, this isn't what I wanted. Let me start to ask some questions to see if I can get it to go where we want it, or I've got to start all over because it's just too messed up here. What we're talking about is developing an ease, an understanding of how to interact with these models. Don't let the model drive you. Don't be scared of the model. Don't think you have to adapt yourself to its processes. You're the one in charge here, people.
Yeah. When you think about what we did when we did the platform video in this series, where we talked about whether Grok or Claude could become a platform for you to help you integrate the
Right.
aspects of your business and understand them better for running. We did it that way. We added one thing, then we added another, then we added another. And then finally we said, now, as a result of this, what is this telling us? And is there anything we're missing in this that we should be
Mhm.
considering? We didn't just give it all to it at one time,
Right.
mainly because it wouldn't necessarily put the right emphasis on everything.
Right.
And we had to react to these pieces to be able to make it make sense to the machine. I'm sure over time it would become more not more context oriented, but it
Hmm.
needed that context. And that's what we see is the two things that we see as the weakness in dealing. One is to just make sure that you're ahead of it constantly because you see what happens when you get behind. We
Right.
made a joke about me, my buddy getting out and having it go off into mathematical analysis for him. My answer, my comment to him was, the machine got ahead of you, right?
Right.
You're behind it now. It's ahead
Right.
of you, and you got to stop that.
Hmm.
Essentially, I let the machine get ahead of me
Right.
on this project. I now have to go back, shut
Mm.
that piece down, and restart.
Right.
So even somebody like me that works using the stuff every day for a lot of stuff I use it with
Correct.
in many different areas of professionalism, not just in what we do, but a couple of other completely different contexts, I still let it get ahead of me. So it's not something that you can easily keep from happening. You have
Right.
to just guard yourself. And fortunately, I had you to turn to say, all right, what have I done? Right. Just like my buddy did. Okay, what happened here?
Right. And I think an important point is, and this ties back with our last podcast, is if you are a CEO, if you are a leader of a function in an organization, understand that your workers who are using these models may not be doing it in a way that produces the output that's right. They may just let the models run. They may not keep in mind what the models can do. They may be just printing out the output that doesn't make sense and handing it into you. This is part of what we meant where it's your responsibility as a leader to understand what's happening in relation to AI in your organization, to make sure people have training so they understand to your satisfaction how to use these models, and also to train people to keep a very, what I'll call a flexible mind about their interactions with the models, depending on their own knowledge, expertise, and judgment about the situations.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Um, and again, it's if you think about the most important thing you can do is apply your judgment to these
Right.
things, right? And the one thing I was trying to do was to figure out, okay, there's something I'm missing here. And that was where you can step in and you saw it right away, where I was lost.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the other thing about these. They're so powerful that they can get you lost, like they did with my buddy or me just this past weekend, or it can convince you. And that's the most dangerous part of these models, Deirdre. And why don't you take that? And we're going to show you an example of where, if you weren't expert enough, it could convince you to go down different roads that just you wouldn't want to go.
Mm-hmm. So my gardening example?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Please, you're going to take over the screen. But let me just describe what we're looking at. This is
Mhm.
a case of Deirdre wanting to investigate a solution that to a problem she's got. Now she thinks she knows how she might deal with it, but she wanted to make sure she was dealing with it in a good way. And was she missing anything? So she's back to what am I missing? And then going from there. So I'll let you take it from here, Deirdre. You're using Claude here, right?
I'm using Claude. I happen to like Claude. And a couple of things that I came to this question, this interaction with Claude, knowing what I wanted to get out of it. That I wasn't I was almost confirming information, seeing if there were things I didn't understand. I have a problem with some drainage in my yard. Whenever I get a stream of thunderstorms, I wind up with some puddling on the lawn, and I want a solution to it. This is the sort of
So
interaction
basically, you have a pond in your front yard, is what it is.
with mallards on it.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's right, exactly. Soon
I did
Canadian
have
geese,
mallards
right? Or Canada geese will be
yesterday.
around.
It's shrunk now. But this would be the type of conversation where I might wander into a garden center, find an employee who looks as if they've been around for a while and just start a conversation with them. Anyone who's walked into, say, a hardware store or a garden center or so forth knows what I'm talking about. You look for experts who can talk you through situations. Now, I happen to know actually a lot about not only gardening, but also drainage issues. I've investigated them. I'm not an expert. I'm always willing to learn more. And so that's how I approached Claude. I wanted to see what Claude could tell me to contribute to my knowledge. I was also not going to push Claude to look for an optimal solution. There are no optimal solutions like this. It's very situational, depending on your yard and so forth. But I want to take you through this to show you the human and machine partnership, the interaction here. And what you'll also find is there were times when I said to myself, I'm stopping with Claude here because I know I'm not going to get more benefit out of Claude, and I'm going to switch to another train of thought. That's another thing to do sometimes when you get to know your model in that first step, the research step of the five-step process. So here we go. Whenever it rains, my yard floods. I think the problem is poor drainage. Could you help me find a solution? Now, Claude was happy to help me troubleshoot this. It had some questions about my yard. Note that it did not ask me about my own expertise. May or may not matter, but that's important from the human machine partnership point of view, that it doesn't know that I already know a lot of stuff about this, a lot about gardening, a lot about ecology, a lot about botany, and so forth. So we defined my yards. And then it came up with very quickly, in maybe 5 seconds, a tailored drainage plan for my situation. So why this is happening? Well, I have clay soil. And it started to recommend some solutions in order of impact. These are not combined, these are individual solutions. Now, right away, we come into an issue. It's a way to French drain can drain water away from the problem area to a lower point, a street, an alley, or a drainage easement. Now, I can just see what my town would say if I created a drain that spewed water over a street or into an alley. This is, I understand what it's saying. What it's doing is Claude is telling me what it has gleaned from all of the data sets that it has trained on. And it's absolutely right. Everything that it says is absolutely right based on what I'll call the academic training that it has received. But no gardener is going to put an open drain going right out into a street. That's the best way to have the town start imposing fines on you. But anyway, here's how to do a French drain, what it'll cost, dry wells, we'll come back to this, aeration, top dressing, a rain garden. Here's the recommended plan. Map the flow, install a French drain, add a dry well, aerate. Okay, this is becoming a major problem. A major solution here may be needed, but anyway. And then things to check with my municipality, get a permit if I need one, call. Okay, now what I did here is I happen to know, because I've been talking with people, that given the topography of my yard, a French drain wouldn't work. I can't, it's flat. There's no downhill drainage here. So I'm dismissing those options and going immediately, me as the human with a degree of expertise, wanting to find out more about a solution that I might use. Do you see what I mean here? I'm not just letting Claude drive the conversation. I'm taking this to where I want the conversation to go based on my knowledge of the situation. For a CEO, this would be my knowledge of the industry or my competitors or what my company can achieve, those sorts of things. So I'm asking it about aeration and top dressing. How do I aerate? I wanted to see what it says. And it's very cute. You can do it in two ways. Do it in this way. Red X, not this way. As it happens, that's the way I've been doing it, but now, we'll try the other solution now. When to do it, how to do it. This is very good. Now, one point I want to make is because Claude is drawing on its academic information, and it must have trained on enormous data sets of gardening information. And also, it's because I've been approaching it from a how to point of view, which it has gleaned by my questions. Please tell me how to do this. Give me a solution here. It's giving me explicit instructions. Frankly, these instructions are more explicit than I would find in most gardening books that I've read for this sort of thing, particularly what to expect afterwards. Your lawn will look rough. No one tells you that. Continue with the top dressing? Yes, please tell me about top dressing. And it goes into the top dressing. The materials, use green checks mean this and this. The orange triangle means not that, though you can. How to do it, how to apply it, how much, what to pair it with, how to do this right, how long until you see results. Now, this is interesting. Within weeks, you may see some results, 1 or 2 years for noticeable results, and 3 to 5 years for a solution. Okay, this may not be the only way I want. I want to solve this now. you know? So but it's very good that I'm getting this information. Now, I say this information is clear, thanks. Now, a neighbor suggested that I build a layer of soil on top of my lawn. Is this a good idea? Now, what Claude says, this is a common suggestion, but honestly, lady, it's not great for you. It doesn't quite say that, but you can see Claude sighing and say, oh no, another one here. And it explains to me why it's not a good thing. What it wants me to do is to go back to the aeration and top dressing, which is good information for me. Now, I'm not going to try to interact with it more. Clearly, it has no use for the solution I've just thrown at it. So it's not worth my trying to get some more information out of it. I'm moving to another train of thought here. This is the point I'm making about the human machine interaction. You read what the machine says, and then you figure out what to do next to get the result you want from it. Okay, let's go to the rain garden. Well, Claude loves rain gardens, and it has a lot to say about rain gardens. Here's how you do it. Is it right for my yard? Yes. Clay soil, flat yard could be great for a rain garden. Pick your location, size it correctly, dig your basin, and then we come to 6 steps. Plant it. Now, this is another area where my knowledge and expertise comes in, and I look at what it tells me to plant it, and it's giving me the plants it's listing are absolutely right. If you're doing a rain garden, you want to have these. The problem is these are all perennials, which means that they appear for just parts of the year and then they die down. And another issue with perennials is that even though these have been specifically selected for a wet area, they can be subject to what crown rot. They can rot in the soil if it's too waterlogged, if there's too much moisture. So you don't just want to go with plants. Now, I'm not giving you a gardening lecture here, for heaven's sakes. I'm sure most of you don't need to know what I'm telling you. But the point is that I, as a human, or as a CEO, or as a leader, have some knowledge that tells me that this is not the information that I need because I know that I cannot just do this. This will not work. So what I do is as soon as Claude allows me, I ask a question. Please tell me more about plants. The plants you mention are perennials. Are there shrubs and trees to use? That is more permanent things that can absorb more water. Again, this is my knowledge that I'm bringing to the interaction to get more value out of the interaction with Claude. And Claude goes right ahead. You're absolutely right about the perennials, and here are shrubs, and here are trees, and this information's absolutely correct. I know that this is correct. And then it goes ahead and says, here's how to do it. You put your trees around the edge, you put your perennials here, you do that. That's fine. And then in Connecticut, I have to check with my Department of Energy and Environmental because their cooperative extensions may give me free plants. Good to know. So I've checked out what it has to say about rain gardens, which is a confirmation of what I know, but there's no additional information. It's told me what it knows, and that's all it can give me. So let's move to another conversation here. Let's return for the French drain. Um, my yard is flat, there's no outlet. So what do I do there? Well, it wants me to create a dry well. And it tells me all about dry wells, but there's a problem with this, and I know there's a problem with this. I have a high water table. And the water table may keep water from draining out of a dry well. Is this a problem? Yes, this is a problem, and you're right to flag it. And it tells me why it's a problem and what I can do about it. And by and large, if I've got a high water table, my options shift significantly. In other words, don't do a dry well, don't do French drains. Now, I will suggest that this is something that I wouldn't necessarily expect it from Claude, but if Claude were really at the top of its game, it would have already told me, look, with a flat yard and clay soil, I'll tell you there are these things called dry wells and French drains, but you can't do that. That's what the expert in the gardening center would have told me in a conversation. So I'm glad for the information, but the humans went out here. I think, Claude is merely confirming that there's no other option here, which is good. It's good information. I'm glad I'm having this conversation. And it's saying if my water table is high, here are the options. You can still do a rain garden, or maybe, frankly, you just embrace the wet area and create a bog garden. The honest bottom line is, except some areas will always be wet. So it's reached the end of its knowledge. This was a very useful conversation for confirmation and for me making sure that there's nothing else out there. I know the scope of the problem. In a business term, there's nothing else in the marketplace that I need to learn. I can start focusing on the solutions that bringing my knowledge of the industry, the marketplace, my customers, and so forth, can to this problem because I've got good backing. It's defined the problem for me. And I say this, you've given me lots of information, and now I want to back away. And it gives me a summary, and I ask for a Word document, and it gave me a 10-page Word document of this conversation. Now, I know most of you don't care about gardens or don't have drainage issues like this. The point is, I'm showing you the human-machine interaction. I know what Claude could do for me. I know what I have to, when I have to change to a new conversation because I've reached the limit of what I want to get from it. I use my knowledge and expertise. I should say I'm not an expert. I use my knowledge about this to be able to tell when Claude needs to be moved in another direction. I prompt it, you know, forget the perennials. I want to know about trees here. And Claude comes up with the trees, but it wouldn't have come up with the trees if I hadn't prompted it. So I have learned in this interaction what the knowledge of Claude is in gardens. It's good, but it needs questions to really get down to the solution here. And this is what Tom and I wanted to show you, that you have to know how to interact with these models to get what you want out of them. Tom, do you want to jump in here?
You have made the point that it's incredibly important to make sure that you know enough or you have a way to know enough to know when and how to redirect the model because you directed the model a number of times here based on your expertise of the or your knowledge of the subject.
Right,
And it to me, the probably the limiting factor here was not getting enough context from you at the beginning. You could have this thing could have been simplified if it had asked you to qualify a lot more up front. This would be like teaching a brain surgeon about neurosurgery when they want a specific question asked and they start teaching it about neurosurgery without asking, are you a neurosurgeon?
right.
Or how close are you to that? Do you mind, Deirdre, if we check and see if Grok gives you similar process to start here? I'm not going to
Why don't we
ask you
go
to repeat everything, but
Why don't we go ahead? I know you like Grok and like to compare the models. And I'll just, while you're pulling that up, Tom, by the way, I'll stop sharing mine so you can share
okay,
yours.
great.
Um, I will say that if I really wanted to, if I wasn't just doing an exploratory conversation, I could have created a document saying, I have a drainage problem. These are the solutions I've already discussed with people. And I could have entered that into Claude as context. I didn't do that because I wanted an exploratory, broad exploratory conversation. But I think even so, it would not have gotten me any farther than I did get with Claude, which was there's nothing else out there, which is what I wanted to learn. So anyway, or that's what I think there is. We'll see if Grok tells me if there's something else.
Yeah, you're going to have to waste a little bit more time here, well, because for some reason it logged me out of.
Okay.
So it's going to take me a second to get to a login of Grok,
Okay.
but bear with me. I'm not sure why it did this, but
You
it
may have timed out.
probably did. Okay, I think I'm there. Yes, I am. I am there. So let me share my screen and you can just dictate to me the first few questions. Let's see how different it is.
Okay.
Um,
And one of the points that we'll be making is that the human machine partnership may change depending on the aspects of the particular model that you're using. So always keep that in mind. You can't interact with Claude always the way you would interact with Grok always. So start a conversation. I have a drainage problem in my yard. I'd like you to come up with um, I have a drainage problem in my yard. Um, what do you think I can do to solve this problem? And let's see if it asks me questions.
Solve the problem.
The problem.
Okay. It's going to probably say, good morning, Thomas. How is the weather in Phoenix today?
No rain out there, so no drainage
No,
problem.
that is true. You know what? That's really interesting. Let's see
Now,
what
you see,
happens.
it's going right to searching the web. Do you
Mhm.
see that? It's not asking me for any information about my yard, which is interesting.
Diagnosing the problem. Where does the water pool? Okay.
Yeah. So diagnose the problem, which is right. Simple, low-cost DIY fixes, more effective solutions for persistent. And here's our French drain, our catch basin, that's dry well, swale, rain gardens or dry creek beds. It's sort of coming up with the same things, but in the abstract here. It doesn't know that I have clay soil, for example, which could change this. When to call a professional. Okay. Quick tips for, oh, you see, it's talking Arizona because it thinks I'm out there, Tom.
Yeah. And I understand why, but but I could easily solve this. Oh, forgot to mention that it's for my home in Connecticut.
Yes. And I'd also mention the clay soil here. Let's see what it does about clay soil.
Go ahead, Deirdre.
Um, and I have clay soil and a flat yard.
Which is very different from what my house was.
Oh, correct. Yes. You see, it's going directly to research. We've said this about Grok in the past, Tom, that Grok is very research focused and not interact. You see, it's got 30 results now. This is on top of the 20 results in the previous search. Um, so that it's just going out there and researching the specific questions. That changes things a bit. Okay. Extend down, aerate the lawn. Now we're at aeration. Add organic matter. That's the top dressing. Apply gypsum. Now that's new. That is new. I haven't heard that. Create an artificial slope. That is some of the regrading that Claude was talking about. Underground. Here's our French drain, our dry well. Pro tip: regrading. Um, Yeah, it's continual annual aeration and top dressing, continue raised bed for planting. Claude said the same. Plant water tolerant or native species. Well, that's our rain garden. And you see the other thing it's doing here. I got a chance to specify for Claude that I wanted to do it myself. That's why Claude kept talking DIY, while Grok is pushing me to call a professional. That's interesting.
It is. Again, what it's not doing is it's not qualifying your expertise and didn't qualify you as whether you want to do it or not.
Correct.
So, I'd like to do as much of this work as possible.
Right. Myself. But you see what it can do at the bottom here before Tom clicks proceed. It wants to recommend Connecticut drainage contractors. Now that's an agent action. It would send an agent out to look for Connecticut drainage contractors for me, which is interesting.
It is. Well, let's see what it does with this.
Wow, 65 results now. Now you see what it's doing here. It's the same sorts of things. We're doing the aeration and top dressing. We're doing the regrading here. We're making sure our downspouts extend out. It's coming back to a French drain if pooling persists. Many people install it themselves. Dig 12 to 18-inch trench. I'm not doing that in my yard myself. We're in professional areas here. Realistic expectations, that's interesting. Clay is heavy and sticky. You may want to do this digging yourself. Consider renting equipment to save my back. Well, that's excavation equipment, and I'm not going to do that. Next step for me, measure the problem, rent the aerator, If I want to tackle a French drain, it will help me. And now you see it has more agent work here. It will go out and find a DIY French drain tutorial, or more useful, it will go out and find lists of Connecticut wetland plants for me. So that's interesting. Grok is always having agents available to go out and pull more information for me. High water table.
Let's see what it does with that.
Right,
I'm saying, speaking of wetland, I have a high water table, I think.
right. 65 results here. How to confirm, uh, how to confirm it's a high water table. That's the same as Claude. Uh, Many of the earlier steps, aeration, downspout extensions, regrading, etc., are good. No French drain, no dry well. So you need that water table information for Grok as well. It wasn't thinking in those terms. If I still want one, sump pump, I've got a sump pump. Longer term soils, switch to raised beds for gardening. Avoid adding more fill if it could push water toward your foundation. That's interesting. Okay.
Deirdre, one of the ways you could potentially solve this is do a reverse sump pump. So pump the water from the thing into your basement.
Could do that,
That could
yeah.
be a big dry well.
Could do that, yeah. But I don't think I'm going to do that,
Okay,
Tom.
well,
Realistic
it's a
expectation.
DIY. I mean,
Yeah.
there
Um,
are people that would think about that.
oh, I'm sure. This is the sort of thing where a lot of people don't understand how houses work or how things like sump pumps work. So they might do any sorts of things. Um, So, and now this is interesting. Speaking of wetlands, if your soggy area shows wetland indicators, best it could be regulated. That's very important in the state of Connecticut, where they're willing to slap a wetland tag on anything. So before doing any deep excavation, I might just have to think about
Yeah, really, no
pulling
kidding. Couldn't that be? You'd be not allowed to deal with your front yard.
uh, or excavate to dig more of a wetland in my yard, which would be a solution, by the way.
Yeah, it
So
would be.
what we're finding here, Tom, and by the way, you can see down here at the bottom here, you see those different colors. It looks as if Grok had three different agents working for
Yeah,
me
yeah.
here. Now, what we're seeing here is different approaches for the two models. Claude was going out and wanted to find more about me, wanted to give me more targeted solutions. Grok went out and did deep research right off the top.
Yeah,
But
in a
as
big
we
way.
refined each conversation, we coalesced around the same solutions here.
Yeah.
We got to pretty much the same area, although I've got to say that Grok brought in more legal considerations, that check to see if you've got a wetland, where Claude was more, I'll be willing to work with you further as soon as you've thought this through. So this is about know your models, and it never hurts to run the same problem on two different models to get the fuller sense of the whole picture. So,
Because you may have stumbled on something that's really important, Deirdre. You could have somebody drive by from the city and they look at that and say, Deirdre, I think you might be part of a wetland and come in
correct,
and do this, and you didn't check ahead of time.
right.
Um, it's not that that can't be overcome. As you know, the area behind my house was a wetland, and the person next door, they were able to work around it, but it's still they had a great bit of their yard they could not develop because it was a designated wetland.
Correct. So that's something to keep in mind, and it's very good. This is an example of how these models can surface something for a CEO where you may not have been thinking along certain lines, and all of a sudden it's giving you more information to put into the whole context of your solution.
Yeah.
So I think what we've done in this podcast, Tom, is we've been talking about some really practical aspects here. It's like, don't treat this stuff like social media. like understand, don't treat it like another word processing program. Figure out what you want out of the models. That was how I prefaced my going into this. I wasn't looking for a strategic plan. Wanted to see if I was thinking about this right, or what this expert could tell me that I might not know. And then I interacted with it depending on the information and knowledge that I had to drive it to a solution that worked for me, or to drive it to a point where I felt I could take it farther. This is an example of the whole human machine partnership, making it work for you and getting the value out of these models. Isn't that right, Tom?
Yes, it is. And if we were going to suggest anything, if you're ever in doubt, try something like this, where you say, oh boy, I lost my screen for a minute. Sorry about that. Where you say, is there anything else I should be asking about?
Okay, let's see what it says.
Or am missing?
Mm-hmm. Our basic questions. What am I missing?
Okay. This is where it gets scary, where it says, oh, yes, there are several important things you might have missed. Okay.
Professional soil test, okay.
Highly
Check for
recommend.
regulated
See,
wetlands.
doesn't this concern you though, Deirdre? This says a highly recommended first step. It didn't tell me that automatically.
Nor did Claude.
Hmm.
Claude assumed that I knew I had clay soil. Grok didn't challenge it when you entered that I had clay soil. Now I happen to know I have clay soil, but that's for people who don't know their soil composition. That's a very important first step. Don't skip this checking for regulated wetlands here. Foundation and basement risks. Well, that's why I've got my basement sump pump.
But you know, Deirdre, this, and I was joking about that, but you and I both know, and we've seen this before, that I had problems because the fellow that was uphill from me
Right,
made a change in their driveway and it ended up with water in my basement because
right,
it was flowing downhill. It hit the side of my house and went down into the foundation.
right.
So that when you're dealing with these issues, this is a real issue and could be
Correct.
an issue in the way you're dealing with it, especially if, now I know you think about these things, but not everybody might, is
Right,
that you could be actually just moving the water to your house. And I was joking about it, but that's possible.
right. Well, it's talking about neighbor and property line issues,
There you go.
and fortunately, I've already talked with my neighbors about this, and they're great about the whole thing. Realistic expectations. My yard may not be dry year round. Okay.
Well, Claude kind of said that to you, why don't you put a water park in the front of your yard?
Yeah, exactly. Plant choices, other practical. How deep did the water run? Okay. Do I have access to a good outlet? Well, no, I don't. Like budget and timeline. This is very good information. This is the real practical stuff that someone needs to know. Mosquitoes are standing water health concerns.
Also, septic. Do you have a septic, Dina?
I do, but this is on a different part of the yard. My septic is
Okay.
safe. So.
But it's a good question, right?
Frankly, my neighbors asked, "Where's your septic tank?" Yeah, yes,
Yeah. So this is where, it's helpful to have somebody that actually thinks like this and can come over and at least give you advice, right? This is the
right,
thought about get somebody over there to help you make sure you're covering this.
right,
But that question that we called it in the Ahead of the Machine book, that's what we call the second question, the one you haven't asked, right at
right,
the end, the very end. Okay,
right,
tell me what I might be missing. We did this in the one of our prior podcasts here, Deirdre. We talked about the insight layer. That was a
right.
question we always ended up with at the very end. What else could I be missing here?
Correct.
So when in doubt, that question itself, you see how that changed the discussion we just had.
Right,
We recommend you put that into a lot of what you're doing, especially if you're doing something, even doing something like a question of health issues. You're going in there to figure out something. You ask that question, what else have I not asked you about I need to know about? Or what could I be missing about all this?
Right.
You'll find some amazing things that'll come up that just didn't come up because the questions you asked didn't frame it properly. And you're
Correct.
seeing it, we're basically that's what we're telling you here, that the output you get is highly dependent on how you interact with the machine.
Correct.
So, Deirdre, it's always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure, Tom. So long for now.